got 5 half-hour sessions. It's nice and easy for you.
Whenever I want, I'll fix my phone whenever I want, I'll do this whenever I want. Technical challenges that LTE faces right now are multiple. First of all, there is the maturity of the technology itself. I think that there's considerable effort taking place in organisations like LSTI, in association with NGMN, also with individual vendors and operators running trials to try and get over that challenge. The next challenge will be spectrum coordination, and that's very close to GSMA heart because it's an essential part of enabling roaming. Unless you have the ability to take a device from one market to another, turn it on, find that it works, find that it camps onto your roaming partner network, then you don't have a viable roaming infrastructure. And then that means that the third part of that is actually interconnectivity between people's individual implementations of LTE and EPC as well. So the core network interworking for roaming interfaces is very significant. And certainly, whilst a lot of people will tell you about just getting the service up and running, one of the things that GSMA focuses on specifically is what's required to make the overall ecosystem that you have today with HSPA and HSPA Plus moving forward something which is applicable to LTE from first deployment. So we're very aware that with 3G initially roaming didn't work brilliantly. What we want to do is be a lot more proactive in making sure that roaming is in place from day one. There's certainly the process in place to allow LTE to offer bandwidth-hungry services which people are going to be after deploying. The kind of question around spectrum is blurred slightly because people don't really care about spectrum. People care about bandwidth and throughput, and so spectral coordination, as I mentioned previously, is very important. But the actual spectrum allocation itself is something which is more about regulators and again about coordination. So I won't care as an end user whether I'm on an HSPA connection, an HSPA Plus connection, an LTE connection or anything else. What I'll care about is having bandwidth available to me to run the applications that I'm interested in. So spectrum needs to be found for any service which is going to be bandwidth hungry. There is underlying consumer demand and there is recognition from regulators that that spectrum has to be found somewhere in frequency range. And so yes, there will be, there has to be, otherwise end users will ultimately be experiencing services at a lower rate and in ways that they don't want to see it, and that will result in customer churn or movement to other technologies. There is a lot of discussion right now about taking spectrum in the 2.5 and 2.6 megahertz ranges. There's also things happening with the European Commission in even higher ranges than that, so 3.4 up to upwards. The IMT advanced process with ITUR will certainly free up some spectral range for new services, be they LTE, WiMAX or anything else which comes along. But I think that within the European market there's also a significant focus on digital dividend, and so within that 462 to 840 range, which is in a lower baseband at the point when people start turning off analog television. I don't think we necessarily expect to be allocated all of it, but the indications from places like France and Sweden are that there will be some at least allocated to these kind of services. All the time that you continue to have GSM in networks, then that is an optimised voice service. It's a bearer which supports voice, and we're not expecting from day one everybody just to switch to LTE. Consumers will have to churn, and as consumers churn, that will gradually turn down the number of people that are on GSM. The ability of operators to support other voice services is dependent upon their adoption of other technologies, and things like IMS, things like just a straight voice over IP, SIP-enabled client, or even third-party applications will take up some of that. There is a critical point at which GSM services will be turned off and maybe voice continues to be supported in 3G, and markets like Japan are beginning to reach that point where they're starting to talk about turning off PDC completely anyway. But ultimately, voice has to be supported somehow. It's the cash cow. Frank Mayverk said that in his presentation this morning, and so we don't think that voice vanishes day one. I think whether it's supported directly over LTE or as a complement is a discussion which will change over time. But certainly the ultimate goal of most operators is to turn down multiple vertically siloed services to get to a point where everything runs across an IP structure and everything is ultimately just an application. The importance of HSPA in the migration path to LTE really depends upon who you are. So certainly we've seen multiple different structures being put forward and multiple different proposals being put forward this morning from different operators. Some say HSPA Plus will be fundamental. Others say that LTE is the next step and HSPA Plus is actually not required. There are multiple factors which influence that decision. The first, I think, is about what operators have already bought and how easy it is to upgrade, whether it has an HSPA Plus evolution path or an LTE evolution path or both. It also depends upon exactly where they find themselves in terms of customer demand and also where they are in terms of the spectrum that they have available and what they need to do in terms of efficiency versus bandwidth provision. The cost of ownership varies, the return on investment as a result varies. So different strategies for different people, and there's also a need to diversify within markets. So we have a very clear indication in Japan, which will be at the front edge of, if you like, higher bandwidth mobile broadband deployment, where NTT Docomo have been very positive about LTE. SoftBank are saying that they will bleed HSPA for every piece of bandwidth that it has. Same market, same customer target, same market dynamic, completely different strategies. So I don't think there's a right or wrong answer. We expect both to coexist, and certainly over the next 2 to 3 years there will be not necessarily two camps because they all coexist together and they're all 3GPP technologies, but certainly different strategies emerging within them.